Have you ever climbed into a modern car, any modern car, and gone looking for a clutch pedal that simply is not there because automatic transmissions have so completely taken over the passenger vehicle market that a manual gearbox in a new car is now a special order item, a enthusiast choice, a deliberate step backward from the default? And yet, if you walk across a truck stop parking lot right now and climb into the cab of almost any heavy truck built before 2015, you will find a gear lever the size of a baseball bat, a clutch pedal that requires genuine physical effort, and a transmission that demands a level of skill and attention that most car drivers have never been asked to develop. So why? Why did the automotive world move to automatics decades ago while the trucking world held on to manuals with both hands for so long? And why, even now, as automated transmissions become more common in new trucks, does a significant portion of the industry still resist, debate, and occasionally outright reject the shift? The answer is not stubbornness. It is not technophobia. It is not a bunch of old school drivers refusing to accept progress because they learned on a certain type of equipment and cannot imagine anything different. Well, sometimes it is a little bit of that. But underneath the cultural resistance, there is a set of genuine technical, economic, and practical arguments that deserve to be understood on their own terms because they reveal something important about how professional trucking actually works and why the decisions made inside a truck cab have consequences that go far beyond personal preference. Hey everyone, Travis Walker here, Titan Haulers, coming at you from a rest area just outside of Pueblo, Colorado. I have got about 400 miles behind me today and a full load of steel heading up toward Wyoming tomorrow morning. And tonight I want to talk about something that comes up constantly in the comments on this channel and that I have strong opinions about from 20 years behind the wheel: automatic transmissions in heavy trucks. Now, before anyone in the comments starts firing, let me be clear about where I stand. I have driven manuals my entire career. I learned on an 18-speed Fuller in my dad's shop in Amarillo when I was still a teenager. I have run the Peterbilt 389 with a manual for years, and I know that transmission the way I know my own hands. But I have also driven the automated units: the Eaton Endurant, the Allison, the ZF Traxxon, and the Scania I reviewed last year. I have got real seat time in all of them. So tonight I'm going to give you the honest picture, not the nostalgic one, not the promotional one, just what I have actually seen and experienced on the road. Let us get into it. To understand the resistance to automatics in heavy trucking, you have to start where the resistance comes from, which is a genuine and well-earned respect for what the manual transmission accomplished in the hands of someone who knew how to use it. The standard 18-speed manual transmission that defined American long-haul trucking for decades is not a simple piece of equipment. It is a mechanical system that requires the driver to manage gear selection across two ranges and two split positions, coordinating clutch actuation, throttle input, vehicle speed, and road conditions simultaneously, while also watching traffic, managing following distance, monitoring gauges, and making the 100 other decisions that driving a 40-ton vehicle on a public highway demands every single minute. Mastering an 18-speed manual takes time, real time. Not hours or days, but months of consistent practice and years to develop the kind of intuitive fluency where the shifts happen without conscious thought. A driver who has genuinely mastered the 18-speed can float shifts, changing gears without touching the clutch by matching engine speed to road speed with throttle alone, with a precision that is genuinely impressive to watch. They can feel the transmission through the lever, hear the engine's note, and know exactly when the gear change needs to happen before any instrument tells them. This skill was not just functional. It was a mark of professional identity. In the culture of American long-haul trucking, the ability to run an 18-speed smoothly and efficiently was part of what separated a real professional driver from someone who was just holding a CDL. Drivers who could not manage the transmission cleanly were noticed, and not favorably. The gearbox was as much a test of competence as any other aspect of the job, and the manual transmission delivered real benefits in the hands of that competent driver. In mountain territory, an experienced driver could manage their descent with a precision that kept brake temperatures under control and vehicle speed stable through careful gear selection and engine braking. On grades, they could hold exactly the gear that kept the engine in its power band without hunting between ratios. In slippery conditions, they could feel the drivetrain's behavior through the lever and the pedal in ways that gave them feedback an automated system does not transmit. That accumulated skill and that tactile connection to the drivetrain are what experienced manual drivers are actually defending when they push back against automatics. Not the inconvenience of the clutch pedal, not the physical effort of the shift, the knowledge and capability that those things represent. Now let us get into the technical arguments because the resistance to automatic transmissions in heavy trucking is not purely cultural. There are genuine engineering and operational concerns that drove the industry's caution, and some of them remain relevant even as the technology has improved significantly. The first and most historically significant concern is heat management. Automatic transmissions, particularly the torque converter automatics that dominate the passenger vehicle market, generate heat during operation. The torque converter, which allows the engine to run while the transmission is in gear and the vehicle is stationary, slips internally to manage the connection between engine and drivetrain, and that slipping generates heat. In a passenger car, this heat is manageable because the loads are modest and the duty cycles are relatively light. In a heavy truck, the loads are not modest and the duty cycles are not light. A fully loaded semi climbing a long grade in summer heat is asking its transmission to manage enormous torque loads over extended periods. Early automatic transmissions in heavy truck applications struggled with exactly this, running hot, shifting inconsistently under load, and wearing faster than the manual transmissions they were meant to replace. Fleet operators who tried early automatic options in heavy applications sometimes found themselves with higher maintenance costs and shorter transmission service lives than they had been promised. This experience left a mark on the industry's collective memory that persisted long after the technology improved. Because institutional memory in trucking is long and skepticism is a professional survival skill. Fleets that got burned by early automatics told other fleets. Drivers who experienced failures passed those stories on. The reputation of automatic transmissions in heavy-duty applications was damaged by early technical limitations in ways that took years of improved performance to repair. The second technical concern is fuel economy, and specifically the fuel economy penalty that traditional torque converter automatics carry relative to direct mechanical connection of a manual transmission. Every time torque is transmitted through a fluid coupling rather than a mechanical gear, some energy is lost as heat. In a passenger car, this loss is acceptable because the convenience benefit is enormous relative to the efficiency cost. In a heavy truck running hundreds of thousands of kilometers per year, even a small percentage fuel economy penalty translates to significant additional operating cost. Travis will tell you that this argument applies specifically to torque converter automatics, and that it applies much less to the modern automated manual transmissions that have become the primary alternative to traditional manuals in heavy trucks. An AMT is still a mechanical gearbox with direct gear engagement. It does not use a torque converter in normal operation. The fuel economy penalty of a traditional automatic does not apply in the same way. And in fact, as we explored in the Gears video on this channel, properly controlled AMTs can deliver better fuel economy than the average manual driver because they make optimal shift decisions every time without variation. But conflating AMTs with traditional automatics is a mistake that gets made constantly in these conversations, and it has muddied the debate for years. Drivers who have legitimate concerns about traditional automatic transmissions sometimes apply those same concerns to AMTs where they do not belong, and the discussion suffers as a result. Here is the concern that carries the most weight in the offices where fleet purchasing decisions get made, and that is the question of transmission durability and total cost of ownership across a vehicle's working life. A heavy truck transmission is expected to last the life of the truck, which in a well-maintained commercial vehicle can be 1,000,000 miles or more. The manual transmissions that have dominated heavy trucking, the Eaton Fuller units in particular, have a documented track record at those mileages that the industry trusts because it has been proven in the field across decades and millions of truck years of operation. Parts are standardized, widely available, and competitively priced. The rebuild procedures are well understood and executable by competent mechanics in a wide range of shop environments. The automated transmissions, and particularly the AMTs with their electronic control systems, solenoids, actuators, and sensor networks, add complexity that the manual transmission does not have. Complexity means additional potential failure points and electronic components in a harsh commercial vehicle environment, exposed to vibration, temperature extremes, moisture, and the general punishment of life on the road, have a failure history that is shorter and less completely understood than the purely mechanical manual. When a manual transmission develops a problem, an experienced mechanic can often diagnose it by sound, feel, and visual inspection. When an AMT develops a problem, the diagnosis may require specific electronic diagnostic equipment and software that is not available at every repair facility. For a driver broken down far from a major service center, the difference between a mechanical problem that a skilled independent mechanic can address and an electronic control system problem that requires a dealer technician with proprietary software is the difference between a short delay and an extended, expensive downtime event. This is not a hypothetical concern. It is a real operational risk that fleet managers and owner-operators account for in their equipment decisions, particularly for vehicles that operate in remote areas or on routes where dealer service infrastructure is sparse. Here is where the conversation has shifted most significantly in recent years, and where the arguments against automatic and automated transmissions face their most serious challenge. The trucking industry has a driver shortage, not a temporary cyclical shortage, but a structural, demographic, long-term shortage that is getting worse rather than better as the average age of the existing driver population rises and the pipeline of new drivers entering the industry does not keep pace. And the manual transmission skill requirement is a documented barrier to entry. Learning to operate an 18-speed manual competently takes time that new drivers have to spend in training before they can be productive. Not every person who wants to drive a truck has the physical coordination, the patience, or the aptitude to develop that skill to the required level. Some people who would make excellent professional drivers in every other dimension struggle specifically with the manual gearbox and either wash out of training or decide the profession is not for them before they have had a chance to develop their other skills. AMT-equipped trucks remove that barrier. A new driver in a modern AMT can focus their attention and their training time on the genuinely complex and irreplaceable skills of professional driving: road awareness, vehicle dynamics at weight, load management, backing and maneuvering, hours of service management, customer interaction, hazard recognition, all of the things that determine whether someone is a safe and effective professional driver, none of which have anything to do with whether they can float shift a Fuller RT6618. Fleets that have transitioned to AMT-equipped trucks report faster driver onboarding, lower rates of drivetrain damage from improper shifting, and in some cases improved driver retention because drivers who feel competent and in control of their equipment from an earlier stage in their career are less likely to leave the profession out of frustration. For the industry's long-term workforce challenge, this is not a minor consideration. It is potentially one of the most significant practical benefits of the transition to automated transmissions, and it is one that rarely appears in the technical debates that focus on fuel economy and durability. Here's the part of the video where Travis stops presenting the arguments on both sides and tells you what he actually believes after 2 decades behind the wheel of trucks with both types of transmissions. The manual transmission made him a better driver, not because it is a better transmission in every objective sense, but because mastering it required him to understand the drivetrain, the engine's power curve, the relationship between gear ratio and road speed, in ways that paying attention to an automated system never would have demanded. The manual taught him to listen to the truck, to feel what it was telling him, to develop a sensitivity to how the machine was behaving that informed everything else about how he drove. He does not think every driver needs to go through that school. He recognizes that the world the industry is operating in right now does not have the luxury of insisting that every new driver spend 2 years developing a skill that an electronic control unit can replicate reliably. The shortage is real, the pressure is real, and the AMTs are genuinely good enough to meet the operational requirements of most applications, but he runs a manual on his Peterbilt 389. Not because he has not driven the automatics, not because he does not understand what they can do, but because the relationship he has with that truck includes the transmission, and changing it would change something about the experience that he is not ready to give up. That is an honest answer, not a technical argument, and he will be the first to tell you that honest answers and technical arguments are different things, and that both deserve to be taken seriously. The manual transmission in heavy trucking is not going to disappear immediately. The installed base is enormous. The skill set exists in the current driver population, and the applications where experienced manual drivers extract genuine advantages over automated systems are real, if increasingly narrow. But the direction of the industry is clear. New truck specifications are increasingly automated, new drivers are increasingly trained on AMTs. The regulatory and economic pressures are pointing in one direction. In the spirit of Travis's commitment to telling you what actually works rather than what sounds good, let us be specific about the applications where the manual transmission still has a legitimate argument in its favor, because pretending the debate is entirely settled would not be honest. Heavy haul and specialized freight, the kind of work where a driver is managing extreme weights on challenging terrain with margins for error that are genuinely small, is an application where the feedback and control of a manual transmission remain valuable. A driver hauling an oversized load up a steep mountain grade on a narrow road needs to feel the drivetrain's behavior in ways that an automated system's abstraction layer makes harder. The direct mechanical connection of the manual, the ability to hold exactly the gear you want for exactly as long as you need it without the system, second-guessing your decision, has real value in those extreme situations. Off-road and construction applications are similar. A truck working in a quarry or on a construction site, operating over unpredictable terrain at low speeds with highly variable load conditions, benefits from the driver's direct control over gear selection in ways that automated systems optimized for highway operation do not always replicate well. And very experienced drivers on specific demanding routes, mountain corridors in particular, who have developed intimate knowledge of how to manage their equipment on those specific grades, can sometimes outperform automated systems on those specific routes because their local knowledge and skill allow them to anticipate and manage in ways the automated system cannot. These are real applications. They are not the majority of trucking work, and they are shrinking as the automated systems become more sophisticated. But they are real, and the drivers working in them have legitimate reasons for their equipment preferences that go beyond nostalgia. Here is something that does not appear in any manufacturer's sales presentation, any fleet efficiency report, or any independent transmission comparison published in a trade magazine. The hidden psychological cost of putting a driver who learned their craft on a manual transmission into an AMT-equipped truck and telling them the machine will handle the shifting from now on. This sounds like it should not matter. It sounds like the kind of soft, unmeasurable concern that gets dismissed in boardrooms where decisions are made on spreadsheets. But Travis will tell you it matters because he has watched it happen to drivers he respects, and the effect is real in ways that eventually do show up on the spreadsheet, just not in the column labeled transmissions. A driver who has spent 15 or 20 years developing an intimate relationship with a manual gearbox has built their professional confidence, at least partly, on the mastery of that system. They know when to shift, how to shift, what the transmission is telling them through the lever and the sound and the feel of the truck. That knowledge is not just functional, it is part of how they understand themselves as professionals. Part of what they bring to the job that not everyone can bring. Put that driver in an AMT and take that control away from them, and something shifts in how they relate to the truck. Not dramatically, not in a way they will necessarily articulate clearly, but subtly, in the way that removing any significant dimension of skill from a skilled person's work changes how they experience that work. The truck is doing something they used to do. And for some drivers, that transition lands as a loss rather than a relief, even when the objective outcome is equivalent or better. Travis is not suggesting this means fleets should keep running manuals to protect veteran drivers' feelings. He is suggesting that the transition deserves more attention and more respect than it typically receives. A driver moving from manual to AMT after 2 decades deserves more than a brief orientation and a pat on the back. They deserve an honest conversation about what the automated system does well, where it has limitations, how to use the override functions effectively, and how their experience and judgment remain valuable even when the shifting itself is handled electronically. The drivers who make the transition best are the ones who approach the AMT not as a replacement for their skill, but as a tool that handles one part of the job so they can apply their skill more completely to everything else. Their road awareness sharpens because the cognitive load of gear management is gone. Their fuel economy improves because the system optimizes what they used to manage manually. Their fatigue at the end of a long shift is genuinely lower because they have not been working the clutch and lever for 11 hours. But that reframing does not happen automatically. It requires the driver to consciously decide to bring their experience to bear on what the automated system cannot do, rather than mourning what it has taken over. The fleets and carriers that manage this transition thoughtfully, that treat experienced manual drivers as people with transferable expertise rather than as a legacy problem to be updated, get better outcomes from the technology change than the ones that treat it as a purely mechanical swap. The transmission changed. The driver's value did not. And keeping that distinction clear is one of the most important things the industry can do as it navigates the shift from one era of trucking technology to the next. So where does this end up? The honest forecast is that the heavy truck manual transmission is heading toward the same place the passenger car manual went, which is not extinction but irrelevance in the mainstream market. The economics, the workforce dynamics, the regulatory environment, and the genuine capability of modern AMTs are all pointing in the same direction. The Eaton Endurant, the ZF Traxxon, the Volvo iShift, the Scania Opticruise, these are not compromises. They are sophisticated, proven, durable systems that deliver fuel economy, drivetrain protection, and driver experience that is competitive with the manual in most applications and superior in some. The industry knows this. The purchasing data reflects it. The percentage of new heavy trucks specified with automated transmissions has been rising consistently for years and shows no sign of reversing. What will remain is the skill. The drivers who learned on manuals carry knowledge about drivetrains, engine behavior, and vehicle dynamics that the automated generation will need to develop through other means. The best of those drivers will find ways to pass that knowledge on through training, through mentorship, through channels like this one, because the knowledge itself is valuable even when the specific mechanical skill that produced it is no longer universally required. Travis Walker will keep running his manual Peterbilt as long as the truck keeps running. And when the time comes to spec the next truck, he will make the decision that makes the most sense for his operation at that point in time, because that is what 20 years on the road has taught him to do. Not to be loyal to a technology, to be loyal to the job. What transmission do you prefer? And would you ever go back to manual after running an AMT? Drop it in the comments below. We genuinely want to know. Thanks for watching Titan Haulers, and remember to subscribe for much more.